Hey guys, Team Yugi here today, and we're going to be talking about the upcoming ban list. And this isn't just going to be me predicting what I think the list is going to look like. I'm going to do my best here to be completely unbiased and actually talk about what needs to be done versus what people want to be done. Because a lot of people are complaining about this format and saying that it's stagnant, it's stale, it's the same decks, which in my opinion is completely false. Because if you look back at formats like even before we got that emergency ban list for Full Power Pendulum, the only decks topping were Full Power Pendulum and Cosmo. Other than that, there really wasn't too many decks that were topping. And then if you look back to Necroz's format, Necroz was the only deck topping. You look back to Dragon Ruler format, there was only Dragon Ruler and there was only Spellbooks. So this format has 4 decks that are majorly topping, as well as a bunch of other decks that are topping every once in a while everywhere, and still consistently doing well. Decks like Mermail are another deck that also works fairly consistently and is going to with cards that come out in the future. But with that being said, I feel that we do have a more balanced meta in that of having 4 main decks. All of them, for the most part, are fairly affordable, fairly cheap. You can play them. I don't know why people are complaining so much. The thing that I can compare it to most currently is probably Overwatch, in which a lot of these decks cancel each other out, just like you have Overwatch characters who cancel each other out when you play online. If you play the game, you understand what I'm talking about. But I want to kind of go in and explain each deck and what I feel is best for the meta and what could change to make it so these decks aren't quote unquote as powerful as they currently are, which to me these decks aren't that powerful. Yes, you have Burning Abyss, who's been topping every event, but that's not just a pure Burning Abyss deck list. And I'm going to explain all of this in a little bit. So let's go ahead and hop in. I'm going to do each deck individually. It's just going to be scattered. It's not going to be in the order that these are right now for which one I explain. It's just going to be in whatever order I feel it should be in. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hop into the explanation on what people want to see hit versus what needs to be hit. Okay guys, so the first deck that we're going to be looking at here is Cosmo, and I'm going to talk about what people may want versus what is actually needed for these decks to be slowed down. So a lot of people are saying that Dark Destroyer and Tin Can should go to 1. I completely disagree with that statement, and there's several reasons for it. There are a lot of outs to all of these cards. It's not that difficult in the current metagame, for the most part, to be playing things in your extra deck like Utopia the Lightning. It's also not that difficult to be siding Kaiju monsters. These are all outs. You can play System Down as well. It's another card that you can side deck. I do not feel that the problem is at all related to Dark Destroyer or Tin Can for this deck. The real issue is this card, Cosmo Town. This is the problem card of the deck that does need to be hit, and it does need to be limited to 1. The reason being is that this card gives you all of your Dark Destroyers back, all of your Tin Cans back, and if you pop this, your opponent gets another one from their deck to their hand. So this card, in my opinion, is far more broken than playing 3 Dark Destroyer and 3 Tin Can. If you get rid of this once, they no longer have a Cosmo Town to search their other Cosmo Towns and keep getting those Dark Destroyers back. Once those Dark Destroyers are gone at that point and they're banished, then and this card is gone, then they do not have a Dark Destroyer anymore, and that makes this card a whole lot more relevant to the deck than this card or a Tin Can. That's completely true. That's how it should be. There are plenty of outs to Dark Destroyer, plenty of outs to Tin Can. If you think that Dark Destroyer and Tin Can are the problem, then you really do not know Cosmos that well, because I've played this deck a lot, and the problem is this card. I know that as being a former Cosmo player. You get rid of this card and you lose. That's how it works. This card and Tin Can are replaceable. This card, you put it to 1, you make it irreplaceable, then you lose the game. That's just how it works for this deck. But let's move on to the next deck and explain what the problem cards are and what needs to actually be hit. Okay, so now we're going to discuss Monarchs. This deck is probably the one deck that you want to be able to consistently beat, whether it's the extra deck variant, whether it's domain variant. If your deck can consistently beat Monarchs, then you have a good deck on your hands. So here's the thing that I'm going to discuss about this deck. I don't feel this card should get hit. I was just doing that as a symbol card for the deck because it's really, really good, obviously. But a lot of the cards that people are saying should get hit, or they want to get hit, are Stormforth, Pantheism, and Domain. And here's where I agree. I feel that Domain should be at 1. I feel that Pantheism should be at 2 or 1. And I feel that Stormforth should be at 2. A lot of people are saying ban Stormforth, put this to 1, ban this. Not at all. Not at all. If you put Stormforth to 1, if you put Domain to 1, if you put this card to 1, it doesn't make too much sense to hit the deck that hard. Yes, the deck is good. I understand completely that you Stormforth with Aether in hand on your opponent's turn and you just completely cut them off. I get that. I know how the deck works. But in order to successfully slow this deck down, you limit the draw power, because this deck, even at full power, does brick a very good amount. So you put this to 2 or 1, and the deck automatically slows down. You put this to 1, and Domain Monarchs are gone. You don't have to worry about those. And honestly, I don't like Domain Monarchs. I like Extra Deck Monarchs. So I would rather see this to 1, knowing that Extra Deck Monarchs only plays 1, and usually you just dump it off of one of your effects anyways. This card to 2 or 1, absolutely. I feel that it can slow the deck down a little bit more. And if you put Stormforth to 2, then you use Pantheism effect. It requires you to search out a Tenacity to also get this card. So I feel that that's more than reasonable. And that's the chance that you do see this card at that point too. So in my opinion, I think this should be at 1. This should be at 2 or 1. Either one would be fine by me. I wouldn't mind either way. So 2 or 1 for this, and then 2 for Stormforth. I do not feel that this card needs to be hit to 1 or ban, because, as I said about Cosmos, there are plenty of outs to Dark Destroyer, and this is one of them. So if you can't play around Dark Destroyer, then you don't know what you're doing. But those, in my opinion, are the cards for this Monarch deck that probably should get hit. I do feel that the way that I set it up, with this being at 1, this being at 2 or 1, and this being at 2, is the most reasonable. It just makes sense to slow the deck down. But that's it for Monarchs, so we're going to go ahead and move on to our third deck. Okay guys, so here's the third deck that we are going to discuss for the current meta, and what should be hit versus what people want to see get hit. So I play Pendulums currently. Pendulums are currently my favorite deck. I feel that it is the most consistent deck that you can probably play, other than Burning Abyss, for the current format. Although people do like to side Anti-Spell and things like that, which, by the way, Anti-Spell Fragrance isn't out to this deck completely, so people shouldn't be complaining when there are options to beat the deck. But let's go ahead and talk about what people feel should be hit. And specifically, this card is Kieran. People feel that Kieran needs to be hit to 1 or ban, and I could not disagree more. This card does not need to be hit to 1 or ban. Could they put it to 2? Sure. I wouldn't mind if the card was put to 2. But the reason that it does not need to go to 1 or ban is because there are cards in the deck that are far more powerful than this card. Because this card does not hurt Cosmo at all. This deck has a very weak matchup against Domain Monarch, which is very unfortunate. It does have a very good Burning Abyss matchup. So basically anything like Burning Abyss is the major deck that this particular deck with Magispectors and whatnot can make a large impact on. This deck highly hurts the deck, seeing they go into their Dante or their Beatrice and you spin it with a Kieran. Yes, I get that Kieran is a good card. Yes, I get that it does a lot against an opponent who's playing a non-Cosmo deck where you can target their monsters. But there are cards in this deck that are far more impactful and necessary to be hit than this card. And I'm going to go ahead and show them to you. So one of them I am not completely sure on. I'll just warn you that right now. But the other two are necessity. So we have Sky Iris Magical Abductor and Performapal Monkey Board. So I'm going to go ahead and explain a little bit about why I have these 3 cards up here. Monkey Board always lets you complete a scale. Always. Once you see it, you have a complete scale, or you could grab a joker to search for something else and complete a scale. So regardless, it's going to give you a scale that you need. Really, really good card. This is the one card that I am unsure on them hitting, though. Because yes, the OCG does have it banned, but realistically, your opponent can MST this, they can Twin Twister it, they can Ghost Ogre it when you activate the search, and then you don't get the search, making this card a little bit weaker than other cards would be. Also, Joker can be effect veilered, so Joker is not a problem at all. I don't feel this card is too much of a problem, but it could be banned just to follow suit with the OCG. People don't realize how good this card is also, because Magical Abductor, you activate 3 spells during your turn and you search for any Pendulum card in your deck. Any one. I think that's a little more unfair than this. I think that's a little more unfair than Kieran, because this searches your Kieran out every single time. I think that Konami could hit this to 2 or 1 very easily because of how good this card is. This card is absolutely broken in the current metagame. It is ridiculous. You get free searches for nothing, and it just makes broken boards every single game. And then we have Sky Iris. Sky Iris is a very powerful card. I do see Konami possibly hitting this card to 1. I think that would be probably reasonable for the game, and it would probably make the most sense. And what I did not mention in the beginning of this video is that these are things that I feel would be the quote-unquote meta nuke for our game, in which Konami says, okay, we're going to clear the meta and make other decks good, which is unfortunate that you have to completely ban every deck to make Blue Eyes good. It just shows how much of a actual crappy deck Blue Eyes is. And the fact that I can go on to DevPro and I can play Shadal Trains and I can destroy 7 Blue Eyes players in a row with Trains kind of shows that Blue Eyes is not the deck that everyone has made it out to be. I do not feel that Blue Eyes is a good deck at all. I'm just going to put that out there right now, because I can even play this Pendulum deck, and Blue Eyes is supposed to stop Pendulums, and I still destroy Pendulums, which is kind of ridiculous that I can do that, and the fact that Blue Eyes is supposedly good against all the decks that I'm trying to play, but yet it's still losing, shows that the deck is in fact garbage and a waste of money. But in all honesty, if you want to see a change to slow Pendulums down, you hit Sky Iris to 1, and you hit Abductor to 1. And I guarantee that your Pendulum decks will not be as good at that point. And that is just statistically true. I have not. Yes, I've won games off of Kieran, but I've won more games off of seeing this and this in my opening hand every single time. That's just how the deck works. But that's it for the Pendulums. We're going to move on to our last deck now. Okay, guys, we are now at our last deck, which is going to be Burning Abyss. This deck has a lot of variants currently, and in my opinion, the most consistent, which also shows in event toppings as well, is definitely Phantom Knight Burning Abyss. So we're going to be discussing Phantom Knight Burning Abyss more than anything in this this explanation. So everyone is saying Dante to 1, Dante to 1, Dante to 1. I do not feel Dante needs to go to 1. I think Konami could hit it to 2, and that would be okay. And here's the reason why. There are other cards that are making this deck really, really broken, and it is not the Burning Abyss engine. That's the ironic thing. Yes, Dante is a good card, and it helps you deck thin to get all of your plays going, and it gets everything in graveyard that you need in grave. But there are other cards in the deck that can be hit that would probably hurt the deck more than putting Dante to 1. I feel Konami will probably hit this deck pretty hard, but I do not think that Dante needs to be their main target. I think they could hit this card to 2 and then hit other cards, and it would be more effective than hitting this card to 1. So let me show you the cards that I think need to be hit. And some of them are weird, and you might question why. But I've played this deck since before it even came out. I've been playing Burning Abyss since it was announced for the TCG back in 2014. So I know this deck probably better than any deck that I currently play or anything. This deck is by far one of my favorite decks of all time, so I'm not going to be biased here. I'm just going to be flat out honest and tell you exactly what the problems of the deck are. And it will probably make a lot more sense after I explain all this. So for the Burning Abyss engine, you have Skarm and Seer. And Konami did their last Burning Abyss hit by hitting this to 2, and they hit Graph to 1. Which to me made no sense to hit Graph to 1, because Graph honestly isn't really a good card. It's not the best card in the whole deck. For Burning Abyss monsters, the best card is Seer, by far. This card needs to go to 1. But if you really want to kill the deck, you ban this card. You could leave Dante at 3 and ban this, and the deck is dead at that point. As long as we have this card at least 1, and we have Dante at least 2, this deck is going to be here forever. But I feel that if you want to slow the deck down, you put this to 1 and you put Dante to 2, and it'll help a whole lot. So I feel this card should go to 1 rather than hitting Dante to 1. I feel that this to 1 and Skarm to 1 as well, because Skarm searches your tour guide if you don't open it. So the less you see this card, the less you see tour guide, which is very significant considering how good of a card tour guide is for this deck. So that's the Burning Abyss engine. So I feel that this should be at 1, this should be at 1, rather than Dante to 1. And then, considering, as I said, Phantom Knights are the most consistent and topping deck for the Burning Abyss variant, I feel that Cloak and Boots should be at 1. And this one is a little weird. Most people wouldn't expect to see this, but let me explain why this engine needs to be hit more than Burning Abyss really does. I feel that you could leave the Burning Abyss archetype as a whole just about untouched. But I think if you hit the Phantom Knights, it would severely hurt the deck. If you put each of these cards to 1, you would see a drastic change in people playing the deck. The deck would not top as much, because we do have Ghost Reaper. And let me just point out how good of a card Ghost Reaper is against this deck. When I played this deck at Nationals, I played several mirror matches, as well as a Monarch Burning Abyss match. And I lost one of the mirror matches. I tied with one of the mirror matches, and I lost to the Burning Abyss Monarch deck, which I was not expecting to play Burning Abyss Monarchs at Nationals at all. But that deck is also very, very good. But the most consistent issue that I had was probably seeing Ghost Reaper from my opponent. It hurt the deck so much, and I feel that people could still play Ghost Reaper and keep your Dante at 3 and still destroy you and blow you out because they Ghost Reaper you. As long as your opponent gets that card, they basically beat your deck. That's how it works. That's why I don't feel that Dante is the issue. If you hit this to 1, you don't get that many special summons off of it. You can't use effect special summon. And also you cannot search with him as much for your Fog Blade. And this card could stay. Yes, it's good, but it targets as well, so it's not an Out to Dark Destroyer. Or any spaceships for that part. So you put this to 1, and you don't get the special summon off of it as much, and you don't get the search for your Fog Blade as much, which is very significant for the deck considering how good the deck is for using those searchable materials. And then you have Cloak, which you banish him, and you search for this, or you search for the other one. You search for Gloves, and this card could stay at 3. It really doesn't need to be hit at all. There's no reason to hit this card. It's not that good. But you put this to 1, and you can't search this as much, and you can't search the other one as much, the Rugged Glove or Ragged Gloves, whatever it is, I don't care. I haven't played this deck in a while now. But you hit these to 1, and you lose the consistency of being able to get those cards. Also, we have Break Sword. This card could stay at 3, it could go to 1. I only play 1 in my variant, so it doesn't make a difference to the deck, in my personal opinion. But you need to hit these 4 cards to 1 and leave Dante at 3. And I guarantee you will see a decline in this deck and how much it's played. And it will not top as much, because this card just gets you cards in your graveyard. These cards make your deck consistent, explosive, and make it possible for you to continue playing Yu-Gi-Oh! This card does not. This card just gives you cards in your graveyard, and keeping this card at 3 is okay, whereas you hit these cards, it's going to completely slow the deck down. So these are a necessity to get hit. This is not a necessity at all. So now that I've talked about the cards that should be hit, I think I'm going to do a small portion on cards that could get lifted off of the list somewhat. So let's go ahead and hop into that. Okay guys, for the final portion of this video, we're going to be discussing exactly what can come off of the list, and I don't mean go to 3 each. I mean they could move to 2, they could move to 3. It's all dependent on the card itself and what else gets hit. But we're gonna go ahead and explain each one of these. So first one is Rescue Rabbit. This card can go to 2. There's no reason that you can't really play this card at 2 currently. Yes, it's good, but its effect is once per turn, and I do not think that Dino Rabbit would be a thing with this card at 2 at all. This card is just kind of out of its prime for the current game. Moving on to the next card, Compulse. This card can go to 2 or 3 very easily. I think it would be a very good side deck card as well if it went to 2 or 3. I think a lot of people could play it, especially if they do a really large meta nuke and they do decide to hit everything, and one of the top decks is Blue Eyes. I do feel that this card would very much benefit from being at 2 or 3 and help other people play the game in a much more, I want to say fair way. I think it would be very fair to have Compulse be at 2 or 3. The next ones are just a personal preference. I feel that it would be fair, though, for the game. Construct can be at 1 or 2 very easily. There's really no necessity to ban this card. The deck that made Construct very good, in my opinion, was Clown Shadal and Shadasmo, or Cosmo Dolls, which is Shadals mixed with Cosmos. The thing is about those 2 decks is that currently, to make a successful Shadasmo deck, it would be very difficult, and you would have like 50 plus cards in your deck, and it would just be too much to work with. And then the problem with playing Clown Dolls is that Damage Juggler is banned. So you would have to use Trick Clown and Hat Trickers, which is not nearly as good as using a Damage Juggler. So very easily, I feel this card could go to 1 or 2, and it wouldn't impact the metagame in such a way that this was the only deck topping. The interesting thing that I would like to see, though, is see Shadal's mixed with Blue Eyes with Construct at 1 or 2. That's the only thing that I see as being interesting about it. And then I feel to match that, we could put El Shadal Fusion to 2 as well. I don't think that this deck would honestly go anywhere. If yes, it would top, but at the same time, it wouldn't be a dominating force. And all the cards are printed in the Mega Pack, so all these cards are fairly cheap, so the budget players can play this deck. And I think it would be a great thing for budget players to play this deck. It's competitive, it works, and I think it would be pretty fair for the current meta and the future meta. But that rounds it up for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I am going to, unfortunately, leave the comments disabled on this because I know everyone is going to get very, very biased and offended by whatever I say in this video. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I explained some of these cards a little bit so people at least get an understanding of how each of these decks works, and what the cards do for them, and what people are saying versus what actually needs to be done. But give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe. Tell your friends about this channel if they play Yu-Gi-Oh! And they want to see some really cool content. I'm going to try and do discussion videos like this for a while, and continue explaining things. That way people know how decks work. But once again, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and tell me what you think on another video, because like I said, I'm going to leave the comments disabled. That way I don't get yelled at and scolded by any subscribers or any non-subscribers. Once again, this is Team Yu-Gi Fails signing out.